I'll go ahead and get started so we can roll through our content. But I appreciate you all first and foremost joining me tonight. If you are, I wish I could see your faces because then I could know that I have some familiar faces here, but I think I see some names, some familiar names, so thanks for joining me. If this is your first one of these Confident Career Changes series, no worries. We have all of the other ones recorded and they are living on the Alumni Relations YouTube page, and you can access it at any time. But tonight we'll be talking about telling your career story, and this is the culmination of this series. This is the last one, the fourth part, and I think it's a really important part of anybody's journey. And sometimes we have to reassess our career story and figure out how to tell it. So we'll be diving into that tonight. So we will move along. If my clicker would, there it goes. Okay. Love technology. So just a few things to start off with. What will we cover today? I want to talk a little bit about in the beginning about why do we need a career story. If you're here tonight, you're either probably curious about it or you know what it is, but you just think, I have no idea where to start with this, and please help me. Where can you use this and when is this important? And then, of course, talking about how to craft your story. So if you do have questions tonight for me, I just do ask that I'll keep the chat open if you guys want to chit chat, but go ahead and use the Q&A function down there at the bottom of your screen instead of the chat if you have questions throughout. So we will have a few slides in the beginning tonight, and then we will pause for questions. So if you've got any burning questions on your mind at that point, we will have a break in the middle, and then we'll have a chance at the end to ask questions as well. And I do welcome those and hope that you are thinking about them because I think it's one of the more engaging parts of these webinars. But first, what I want to do is give you just a little bit of a sense of, so if you've been with me before, this is not new information to you, so apologies. So you can go get a drink of water or something if you feel the need to, but for those that are new tonight with us, and maybe you haven't done a webinar with me before, and you're curious, what do I have access to at the University of Richmond as an alumni, or perhaps even as an SPCS or MBA student, or graduates of those programs, because I work with all of you all. So I wanted to spend just a couple minutes telling you some of the things that you do have access to. So first and foremost, a large bulk of my job, a lot of what I do is one-on-one advising, and I love it. It's the reason why I got into this type of work, and it's sort of the thing that keeps me going with it. So we can chat one-on-one if that's something that you feel like you need, because these webinars that I do are really just primers to sort of give you some initial information to start thinking about, and maybe some practical things to start working on. And then really, I think where a lot of people really get some real work done is through one-on-one chats with me and appointments. So we can do that. Down there in that little yellow box, there is a link to Spider Connect, and I'll send out this webinar after probably in the next few days, and so you'll have access to all the links. But Spider Connect is a lot of things for your career services, but one of the most important things it does is as our scheduling tool for appointments. So if you are thinking, I have no idea what Spider Connect is, Becca, and how do I even access it, shoot me an email. My email will be at the end of the presentation, and I will give you instructions on how to access that. But there are a lot of things that we can talk about in an appointment, including, but not limited to, the things on the left side of the screen there. An action plan. So maybe you're at a place where you're not really sure. You're probably here tonight with me because you're not really sure. Maybe you're at a crossroads. Maybe you're looking for more direction. But whether that is looking for advancement, if you're a career switcher, or if you find yourself currently or down the road in an unfortunate situation of a job loss, let's chat and we'll figure out an action plan. We can talk about job search strategy. If it's been a while since maybe you've done that and you're feeling like, I'm not really sure how this goes anymore, let's chat. And we can also do mock interviews and help you practice the Q&A portion of that. There are lots of resources that you have access to. First and foremost, if you, again, click on the link for or you can just go to YouTube and look for the University of Richmond Alumni Relations, and you'll have their page pop up. All of the great webinars that not only they have done, they do, fun stuff like meditation and yoga and all kinds of sort of educational, entertaining things. I do more of the professional development stuff, and you can find all of those there on their YouTube page if you want to access them. And there are lots of other resources that we have available too, and we can chat about that when we talk. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and dive into the content that we have tonight. So like I said, I wanted to first talk about why do we need a career story. Yes, I was the kid that asked questions about everything and why, so I always think it's important to address that first and foremost, because if you don't understand the why, it's really hard to accept and understand the rest of it, right? So first and foremost, why do we need one? Because stories are really important to us. That's one of the main ways that we connect with other people. And professional development and all of the things that go along with that are, while on the surface they seem very transactional, they're not really, right? Like, they are transactional in a way, but in another way, more importantly, it is about connecting. Even when you're interviewing or you're doing some sort of networking for your job search, or if you're just out there meeting new people within an industry or within your industry, stories really matter, and that's how we connect to people. And that's why I wanted to talk about this stuff tonight. At the heart of it, at the end of the day, we are really emotional people who crave connections. And I think this past year has certainly made that stand out. And that has shown, I think, all of us that we are, in fact, people who crave connections and are really emotional about those connections. Even when it comes to your job search and your professional development over the years, it is really important to connect with people on some kind of a level, a personal level, so they can understand more about you and how you got to where you are and why you're headed where you're headed, right? We are also much more likely, our brains are wired to remember stories rather than facts. And because we connect with stories much better than we do connect with facts, we will remember them far more. And also, a genuine story will really make you stand out among the crowd when you are job searching or networking and all of that good stuff. Excuse me. So how does this really help you in the end, right? In all of the hustle, this will also allow you a chance to reflect, maybe back on some inspiration or parts of your story and how you got to where you are today. And it really helps you tap better into your authentic self. And when you can connect with that, that makes you so much more confident and excited to tell people about your journey and how you got to where you are, right? Sometimes it's not always on the surface, it seems not always great. Maybe you're in a place that you didn't expect to be, or you're in a place that you got to for some reason, but you're just really not happy with it. There's something that brought you here, right? So some reflection, some introspection, I think, can help maybe shed some perspective and light on that. And hopefully that's what you will leave with here tonight. It also helps you to organize your thoughts, especially when you are talking to, again, like either in an interview setting or talking to folks just for sort of networking or informational interview purposes. If nothing else, if you've attended any of my webinars in the past, you know that I tend to share sort of, personal stories, and because if I ever wrote a book, I always joke that my book would be called Lessons Learned, because I have learned those lessons, usually the hard way, which makes for really embarrassing stories for me, but funny for you. I remember a few years ago when I was job searching, and I sort of didn't expect to be in that place at that point. I mean, sort of did, sort of didn't. So it was a slightly unexpected situation. And one of the first informational interviews that I did was with a VP of an office that I was really excited about, and I really wanted to make a good impression and connect with him. And one of the first questions he asked me when we sat down just to chat casually, this was not even a formal interview, was, "So what brings you here today?" And I pretty much almost broke down and cried in front of him, because I had not practiced my story, and I was not prepared to tell anybody other than those in my closest circle why I was in that situation, right? And so it was embarrassing. Luckily, this man was really, really nice to me, and he was very understanding. He was like, "Look, I have been there before. I totally get it. Let's talk through this," right? But I would rather have you all feel prepared than be in a situation where you maybe get somebody that's not as receptive on the other end. So please take my very embarrassing story and learn from it, and take this information to heart tonight. Um, so I think after this one, we'll have a pause for questions. If you've got any questions, feel free to post them in that Q&A down there. So what is a career story, and how do we use it, right? So this really, again, like I've said a little bit before, it's the story of your journey. It's how you got to be where you are today. Things that you can incorporate into your career story depends on the situation, right? Like who you're talking to, what sort of purpose of the conversation is, but incorporating why you're interested in this company and or this type of role, what skills you have that make you a good fit, right? These would be more appropriate for interview settings, things like that. It can also be the story of how you got to where you are today and why you want to work in this industry. And so also selling yourself a little bit with those transferable skills, talking about why you're a good fit for this. And these are really good for just sort of those more casual networking situations, or if you're in an informational interview, such as my lovely embarrassing story previously. You can also talk in here about why are you in transition, coming off of a hiatus, re-entering the workforce, those kind of things. There are all kinds of places in which you can use your career story, including but not limited to cover letters, interviews, online portfolios, personal websites, especially with the LinkedIn. In the summary section, I think these are always good places to use either bits and pieces or all of your career story that you end up crafting. And it also, at the end of the day, it really helps your networking contacts to get to know you better, right? Because if you are finding yourself in either an unexpected situation, or you are, let's say, re-entering the workforce and you knew this was coming, and you're reaching out to those in your circle, or you're being introduced to to new people, this can really help give them context in terms of why you're here. And I think at the end of the day, the most important thing, I think the reason why I thought this was a really important topic and a really important thing to focus on, is because one, it's one of the parts of anybody's professional journey that usually gets glossed over. But honestly, at the end of the day, if you don't tell your story, somebody else will, or they will assume things, and usually it's not. Usually it's not things that you might want them to assume. Okay, so I am going to take a sip of water, and I will pause for questions. I do see that we have one, so I will get to that in just a second. All right, so we have one. I do appreciate that, Wendy. If there are any more that pop up, feel free to shoot them in that Q&A. So Wendy asked, do you recommend having one story or crafting multiple ones for different situations? That is a great question. I think in this situation, one size does not necessarily fit all. And so I think depending on, and this is where this is really good primer information, right? But if we were to chat one-on-one, we could really dive into this and figure out what would work for you. But I think as a general rule of thumb, depending on, again, your situation and what you're trying to do, it might depend on the audience that you're talking to, right? It might depend on the purpose of that conversation that you're having. Maybe depending on how you sort of craft that or have it make sense for your audience, right? And how you how you tell that story. So I hope that's helpful, Wendy. Okay, so I don't see any more questions right now, so we will go ahead and move on to our next little bit of content here. So I wanted to dive in about crafting your story. So these next few slides are really getting more into the nitty-gritty of this. And so if you want to take notes, or again, we'll send out afterwards these slides so you can have them to refer back to, or this is of course being recorded. And so if you want to go back and listen to it again, just for some more context, feel free to. But really, I like to think about this in terms of 3 different parts, because when it's something as telling your story to somebody else's seems at first very daunting and overwhelming, and it feels like this huge thing that you have to do. And the easiest way to tackle any big situation or thing to do, especially when it feels very gray instead of black and white, right, is to break it down into little chunks. So that's what my goal is here tonight. So really, thinking about what is your origin story. And when you're sort of diving into the nitty-gritty, if you're going to sit down and work on this a little bit, I would first and foremost recommend clearing your mind a little bit and really just giving yourself some space and peace and quiet to think about this. Hopefully you can calm the chaos if you have chaos in your house, or find a quiet spot, and really be able to sort of be with yourself and think about these things, because they do require some definite thought. But your origin story can consist of things like, why this career field? So if you're a career switcher, why are you changing careers, right? If you're re-entering the workforce, or if maybe you're even looking for advancement, like you're not really looking to change careers, but you're looking to move up. What has sustained you in this career field, and where do you sort of see that going? How did your interest come to be? I think with origin stories, people always love to know, why. How did you get excited about this, right? What sort of got you into it at first? In my industry in particular, when we interview people for career advising positions, we really like to ask, how did you become interested in career advising? Things like that. And it's always really interesting to hear people's stories. Where you can, with your origin story, really try to incorporate, again, some personal stories, things that are funny, heartwarming, because again, people will remember those more so than they will other sort of details or information. So just a really basic example of this would be like a project manager who's been organizing things since childhood. Like maybe they reorganized their, they color coded their parents' clothes in their closet and said, look at what I did. Aren't you so excited and proud of this, right? Or maybe they always kept their, this is going to date me, but maybe they always kept their CDs organized, or alphabetized, or things like that. So sort of tying any kind of interesting or sort of intriguing story to that, I think, is always really helpful. When I was thinking about my career story, and especially when I was getting started in this industry, one of the things that I was always talking about, and I would still talk about it to this day, why I'm interested and got into this field, is because this was never something that I utilized when I was a student. it was there, right? I knew where the career center was on campus, but it was like this really distant place across campus that I never went to. And what is even in that building, right? And understanding the power and the real benefit that can come from career services being offered to members of an institution, that occurred to me later in my career. But it was never something that I knew as a student. And so for me, it was a need that I felt like I wanted to be a part of fulfilling for an institution. The next part here is the rundown. And so this would really focus more on like the relevant experience that you have, or those transferable skills, focusing on your goals, accomplishments, and positions for each of the role, or for each role maybe that you've been in. And so this could really be thinking about, maybe you've had, I talk to a lot of people too who have a colorful variety of work history, right? So maybe somebody initially looks at your resume and goes, these are some really various roles. And initially they don't know how to make sense of it. But part of your career story can help them make sense of, this is how I moved from this role to this role to this role, right? And sort of what the commonalities were there, or how you made that transition. What was the common thread and the common theme? And here, of course, you don't want to ever recite your resume. You want to sort of look again for those common themes and connect those seemingly random jobs that you've had, or experiences, into something that makes sense for the listener. And really thinking here about, what narrative do you want to tell? What part of yourself do you want to stand out and have the audience understand about you? And so you can start, thinking about pulling out key accomplishments and roles that reinforce that narrative. And honestly, sometimes in the grand scheme of things, like some jobs that we've had are just jobs. They don't necessarily mean anything. Maybe it was just a situation or a place that you were in your life, and it was just something that you had to do. But really, for the purposes of this, focusing more on more on those roles that reinforce the narrative that you want to tell, right? And then finally here, connecting the dots. So this is, I think, oftentimes a good way to wrap up your career story. And this is really a part that helps to tie your interest and background, for the listener, back to where you are, right? Like to the role or industry that you want to focus on. Again, whether that is if you're a career switcher, if you're re-entering the workforce, or if you are looking for advancement and staying with the same industry. And then, so thinking these could be some good questions down here that you can start, maybe doing some brainstorming and some just sort of free flow writing on, what caught your attention about the job or industry? What about it sounds like fun, and what made you apply to this? If you're in an interview setting, what made you apply to that particular role? I think for any hiring manager, no matter what industry you're in, they always want to talk to people who, if it's interviewing or networking, they always want to talk to people who are excited about what they do, right? And so I think thinking about, with what you're focusing on in terms of roles or industries, what about that excites you? What about that makes you get up and most of the time want to go to work, right? What sounds like fun to you, right? Those are the kind of things I think that really, again, help to emotionally connect people with one another, because that, something that you say there might really resonate with the person that you're talking to, and they go, yeah, you know what, that's what actually really gets me excited about this work too. And so really trying to spend some time on that for yourself, I think, not only helps your audience understand you better, but it also helps you maybe get reinvigorated about this and maybe re-excited. Because when we're in a place where we're feeling like we're in a rut or just a little bit frustrated with things, it's really easy to forget why we initially got excited about something, right? And so hopefully you can do a little diving into and thinking about that. Now, for the really nitty gritty part of this. So when you are ready, maybe it's tonight, maybe you're going to hit some big inspiration. Maybe I've done that for you today, or maybe in the next few days or the next few weeks. When you are feeling like you're ready to start brainstorming and really getting some stuff down on paper, here's some things that I would recommend, right? And these can be either, you can think about them in terms of like prompts for yourself to begin writing and brainstorming, or thinking these can be parts of your career story. So first and foremost, grab whatever it is that you want to write with. Some people are more comfortable with a computer. Some people want to grab a pen and paper. Get comfortable. Grab a warm cup of tea or whatever it is that sort of, makes you feel really cozy, and just get in the zone, right? Prepare yourself to write freely and openly. Like I said earlier, if you can find some peace and quiet, try to do that. And just, I think, reminding yourself too that the first, whatever you get down on paper doesn't have to be perfect, right? And that not all of these things on the slide might apply to you, and that's perfectly okay. If there's something else that's inspiring you, write about it. And I think, this doesn't have to necessarily be super long by any means. When I, again, my really super embarrassing story from earlier tonight, when I finally left that informational interview and like wiped the sweat off my brow and thought, okay, well, thank gosh, that wasn't a total bomb. And I really went home and thought, okay, I need to sit down with this. I really, really need to figure this out, because this is not the last time I will ever get asked a question that I am unprepared for. And so what I did was I sat down, and some of these things came to my mind. I really thought about it. And I did to Wendy's question earlier, I did have a couple different versions. It was, again, depending, like if I was in a formal interview, I sort of knew what I would be saying. And if I was in sort of a more casual networking conversation or just getting to know somebody, it was a slightly different version. It was just a little bit less formalized, I guess you could say. And so I had a couple versions of these, but the most important thing was I really spent time thinking, what do I want my audience to know? And what is the narrative from this that I want them to understand from what I'm trying to tell them? What's the impression that you want to leave them with? And so once and what I did was like, I think I got a couple of versions down on paper, and then I let that marinate for a few days when I came back to it. And, I thought, okay, does this make sense? And I would do things like I would read it out loud to myself. I would read it out loud to trusted friends and family and colleagues, and say, does this make sense to you? What do you think about this? And then once I felt like I was really comfortable with that, then I would have that, I would practice it, right? If especially like, so for example, before I was going into an interview, a formal interview setting, and I knew I was going to be asked some version of like, what brings you here today? Tell me what's going on with your resume, that kind of stuff. I would have that mentally prepared in my mind, right? Now, it was not an exact regurgitation of my story, but it was very close to it. So that's the other thing that I do really recommend here in the situation, is to, once you get something that you're pretty happy with, practice it, right? Say it out loud to other people, say it out loud to yourself, because the more that you can do that, the more comfortable you get with it. And when you get a question where you need to share part or all of your story, it just sort of comes to you, right? You might still be a little bit nervous about it, and that's totally fine. I was nervous all the time when I interview, even though I teach this stuff, I get nervous all the time. But at least it's there in your mind, and you sort of you understand the flow of how this should go. And so having the words come out of your mouth is a little bit easier. So that's my little spiel for that. But in terms of brainstorming things, here's sort of where you can start, your beginnings. Again, where did you start with this? Was there a moment that you knew that something that you're pursuing was a good fit? A time when things just clicked, right? Like maybe you lost track of time, doing this thing that you're pursuing, and you thought, okay, so this is something that I really like, and it's something that I really need to pursue. Was there a first success that you had, right? Something, what made it feel so successful for you? And then what did you learn from that success? Because that's another way to reconnect with other people, is saying like, this was my moment when I knew this was something I was really excited about. Have you had light bulb moments? Was there a project that you did that was really inspiring? So think here about your career twists and turns. Was there a challenge that you overcame, right? Because oftentimes, even though when we're in the thick of a challenge, we think, oh, this really stinks. I can't wait to get out of this situation. Not looking forward to it, right? But challenges really bring out the best of us most of the time. I will not comment on this last year, but for the most of the time, challenges do oftentimes tend to bring out the best of us, especially in retrospect. Hindsight's always 2020, right? So was there a challenging moment that you had, and then talking about the steps that you took to overcome it? And then what did you learn from that challenge, right? Was there a notable mentor or influence for you? So did somebody give you a crucial piece of advice that sort of led you down this path? Again, that could sort of be a light bulb or an aha moment too, where you had a conversation and you went, yes, okay, so this is I think where I need to be headed, right? And also understanding that influencers in our lives, no matter who they are, they can be colleagues, bosses, former bosses, just all kinds of folks, but they can also teach us what not to do, right? If you're going to incorporate this into part of your story, just this is a very sort of thin line to tread in terms of how you talk about it, because even if somebody was really, really terrible to you, you never ever want to paint them in a really bad light, because it just makes you sound sort of negative and vengeful and things that are just not positive traits that somebody would want to know about. And this last piece here, really imagining your future. When you are brainstorming, right, think about your future, dream, write it down. This is also very empowering. Where do you want to be? If we can't, I'm a really big believer too in the fact that, like, if we can't see our own vision, nobody else can see it, right? So dream and write it down, even if you have no idea how you're going to get there, right? Maybe that feels very fuzzy, very gray right now. Dream about it, write it down, put it into the universe and put it into existence. I'm a big fan of that. And maybe perhaps, oh my goodness, you could share it with somebody. And that would be really putting it into the universe if you have the words come out of your mouth. So hopefully these are really good things that can sort of help you get started with the brainstorming process. And and like I said earlier, just pick maybe one or two or three of these to start with. You don't have to start with all of them. Or if there are other things that come to mind for you to start brainstorming and thinking about your career story, go ahead and write about those as well. So I think this is the last slide for tonight. So again, if you have questions, please pop those in the Q&A there at the bottom. So these are, again, just sort of some things that I've picked up along the way. A little bit, we've probably already talked about it before, but some of my favorite tips for crafting your story. Again, look for common themes. So if you, no matter where you are in this process, if you feel like you've had a bunch of random jobs throughout the years, if you maybe have made a career transition or two over the past, or if you're re-entering the workforce, look for commonalities between your past jobs and your experiences. Again, this is sort of what I was talking about before with the common thread. So is there a particular thing that holds these experiences together? And remember too that, not every experience needs to be included here, because sometimes life just has us, we just have to do things to get by, right? Um, but for most of the experiences that you've had, are there themes that you have seen commonalities between them? Um, so just sort of to give you a little bit of context here, or just maybe helpful understanding. Um, like for me in particular, because I know my story really well, and it's easier for me to share than especially somebody that I've worked with in the past. But for me, the theme or the commonality that I have always had throughout any job, um, even if it was a really crappy retail job, right? Uh, is the commonality has always been the fact that I just want to help people, right? I want to be a guiding force. I want to be a part of their story or a part of their journey, right? Even if that's maybe this big and it's, just a random conversation or something that I said that they went, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Even when, even when I was working retail, which for me personally was not my favorite. I know some people who love retail, and bless you, because the world needs you. Really my whole goal with working retail was just to help the customers find clothing that they felt really good in and that they really liked. I didn't give two hoots about selling a store card or anything like that, but I really just wanted to help them feel good about what they were purchasing and what they were wearing. And so if there are themes like that that you're sort of noticing for yourself, those are good things to focus on. What have you enjoyed throughout your career, especially if you've had some random jobs over the past, have there been particular things about each of those or a few of them that you have enjoyed more than anything else? And then, when you sort of pull those out, are they commonalities, right? Are they sort of things that go together, right? And what has continued to inspire you over the years? And again, like for me, so it really, the inspiration has come with working with other people, having those conversations, hearing their stories, understanding their stories, connecting with them on some kind of a personal level, right? Um, Even when one of my other really, really random jobs that I had in the past was I used to work for a sports retail company, and I would sell like large orders of, practice gear or cleats or anything like that to sports teams where I live. And again, like working with an angry football coach was not my most favorite thing to do in the world. But it was really rewarding and satisfying when I could help that customer get what they needed. If I could solve a problem for them, like say we had a shipping or logistics problem, I could help them solve that problem and get them the equipment that they needed on time. That was really fulfilling for me. When you are thinking about crafting your story too, when you start getting some drafts down and putting stuff together and having it make sense. Really try to avoid overused words here. So tips that I have are like, write your story how you would tell your friends and family, right? Don't try to really formalize it. Don't try to, make it super corporate or really businessy kind of language. You want to avoid being super casual, but you also want to tell it how maybe you would be sitting around telling your friends and family, over a nice dinner, having how it would make sense to them that way, and keep it simple, right? You don't have to overcomplicate things. Um, and, especially with, depending on your situation, keep it really simple. Also, in terms of, you don't have to give your audience a bunch of details, right? They just need to have enough detail to understand how you got to where you are, why you're here, and where you're going, right? That's what they need to know. They don't necessarily need to know a bunch of details that you either don't want to give them or aren't comfortable giving them. So don't feel like you have to, open up a lot to other people in this situation, but just enough so they sort of get it, right? Like for example, I've been in an interview situation before, and this was quite a while ago. But I remember it was still in the career services industry, and we were hiring for another career advisor, and um, what the person interviewing that we had actually ended up hiring was an older person. And so initially, I think a lot of times people are like, oh, nearing retirement age, why are you here? What's going on with that? And plus this person was moving way out of state. They were way out of state and trying to get to Virginia. And we so I think in an interview setting, one of the first questions is, so what's going on with that? Even if we don't ask it out loud, we're thinking about it, right? So this person, in terms of like how they introduce themselves, and part of their story to us as the interview panel, was they got in front of this and they addressed it for the crowd, so that people would understand and not ask, or assume things. And didn't give us a whole lot of detail. It's fine, we didn't need to know it, but all we needed to know that this was, for personal family reasons. This person had family that was more up the East Coast and just wanted to be closer to help be there and have better accessibility and take care of them, right? That's all we needed to know, right? Definitely had the skills and the abilities to do the job that we were asking them to do, but having that little bit of context, because otherwise the thought was, well, this is weird. Like, why do you want to move, 6 states up and to a little, University of Richmond school, which we think very highly of, but again, it's not, a huge institution, right? And so that was really helpful for us as the interviewers to understand where this person was coming from. Pretending that someone is introducing you to a crowd, so when you are sitting down to write this story and really sort of craft things, again, like we talked about a little bit earlier, making it much more conversational. Maybe if you can put some humor in there, some light humor, that's great. But really being able to paint the picture of yourself for a crowd. And, maybe thinking to yourself as well, how would I want somebody to introduce me to a crowd? And it probably would not be in really super formal business speak, but more conversational, right? So the last thing I have down here is, for career changers in particular, which probably you're here partly for that reason, really framing your shift or gap in a way that highlights it as part of your journey. I think this, over the years, I've worked with quite a few career changers, and I think this is one of the things, because if you haven't been already, you will probably be asked like, oh, interesting, so tell me why you want to get into this particular field. Weaving it into, again, those themes, those commonalities that you have as a part of your journey, instead of just, sort of, I am wanting to make this career change because I'm unhappy in what I've currently, been doing for the last number of years. And I just think this is a much better opportunity. Okay. Give them the reason, give them a different reason why. Because even though if that is the case, again, that's not going to really connect with other people, and that's not really going to necessarily resonate with them. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so we are nearing the end, which is great timing. I'm actually really surprised and proud of myself that I didn't go overtime. So we see we have one question, and thank you very much for that. So if you have other burning questions on your mind, we still have some more time, so you can pop this into the Q&A. But this person asked, if you have a somewhat embarrassing misstep in your past that ended up pushing you in one career direction, is it best to just own it in an initial job interview, or hold that until conversation? I'm just thinking. So I think, again, it sort of depends on, I'm not sure who you are, but I would love to chat one-on-one. So hope you do reach out to me later. I think this is a really important thing to sort of think about, right? Because I don't think anybody gets through their entire career and up until the time of retirement with doing 0 embarrassing things. Case in point, Becca Shelton right here. And so if you feel like you have an embarrassing misstep, I mean, first of all, like if I were chatting with you one-on-one, I would be curious to say, okay, well, what do you consider embarrassing? Because maybe it's not embarrassing to somebody else. Um, and maybe it wasn't necessarily really bad. Maybe it was just sort of like, oops, I didn't mean to do that, or something else. Um, but I think if you're ever, if you're feeling sort of really cautious, like I don't really know whether or not to do that, um, uh, I think maybe backstepping just a little bit and maybe thinking about like not owning it in the initial job interview and just sort of seeing, it depends on what the misstep was. Like, if would the people that are interviewing you initially, like, would they first look at your resume, or when talking to you go, well, clearly she made a misstep, right? Because if it's something obvious that they would see, maybe that's a story that you need to get in front of. Maybe it's not, and maybe you can hold off on saying anything about it in the beginning and just sort of feeling things out. So I'm sorry, I don't know. I hope that was sort of a clear answer. Um, again, I would love to just chat one-on-one and see if I can help you work through that piece, because again, I totally don't know what exactly happened, but I feel like I would probably understand that on some level, given things that I've been through. So I hope that was helpful, at least to start thinking about that. We got a couple more here, which is awesome. Appreciate it. Love it. So somebody asked, how long do you recommend for a story to be? Hitting all the points on the outline may provide a length. Correct. Right. Like, so all the points that I provided on the outline are just places that you could start. Right. Maybe they don't apply to you. Maybe you are looking at that and going, that's not inspiring to me at all right now. I don't want to, I don't want to talk about that. And that's totally fine. I think when I was crafting my story, when I actually wrote it out, it might have been like a half a page, 3/4 of a page. And again, like, this is also where the practice part comes in too. Like, if you're saying it out loud and 5 minutes later you're still talking, like, maybe you need to shorten it a little bit. But I think, yeah, mine ended up being maybe a half to 3/4 of a page. It was just enough information to to sort of help them understand, like, why I was here, where I was looking to go, and a little bit about my skills that had sort of led me to this point. So hope that's helpful, Wendy. Okay, so somebody else asked, how long should it be? Is there a time limit for what is appropriate, or does that vary by situation? I think it does vary by situation. Again, so if you're going into a formal interviewing story and you can maybe expect that you're going to be asked, what brought you here today? So I see that you used to work in XYZ industry. What brings you to this point today? If it's a full interview setting, of course, like, generally speaking with interviews, you never really want your answers to go for, 5 minutes or more, right? Um, but if it's a networking situation, again, like, it depends on, I think maybe keeping it short and sweet in the beginning. And because a networking situation is different than an interview, right? Like, with networking, you have the chance for much more conversational back and forth banter. And so somebody might ask you a follow-up question, or, sort of probe a little bit deeper. Whereas in interviews, generally speaking, interviews are, the people interviewing you are not going to really like ask probing personal questions about that story. So with an interview, if you can just give them enough like satisfying information to help them understand why you're here, that's helpful. But yeah, I mean, I think with networking, it sort of just depends. But I think maybe to play it safe with networking situations, you might just want to think about starting off a little bit short and sweet, and then just sort of seeing where that conversation goes, because you have more of a chance for back and forth on that. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. I will go ahead and wrap things up tonight. And again, I really do appreciate you being here with me this evening, spending your time. I really sincerely hope this was helpful. If nothing else, leaving you a little bit inspired to tackle this. Because like I said in the beginning, this is, I think, one of those pieces that sort of gets glossed over, and you don't really realize that you need to have something prepared until you are, you know, in a situation where you almost break down in front of a VP, which is not good for anybody. It was not a good look for me. So hopefully this is something that will be helpful to you. If you like this content, I am doing another series in next week, which very hard to say that that's March. I can't believe it. Anyway, here we so in March, every Tuesday, I will be doing from 12 to 1 my Back to Basics series. And this is really designed for folks like maybe you are feeling this way, that it's been a while since you've tackled some basic professional development topics, and you feel you just want a little bit, you want to brush the dust off a little bit and feel better about those things. So on the, what day is that? The 2nd, as a matter of fact. So March 2nd, I'll be starting off with resumes and cover letters. And the next week I will do LinkedIn and so forth. And so you can check out all of these on our calendar, careerservices.richmond.edu, if you want to get more information on those. And again, in the follow-up email to tonight's session, I will be sending out more information about those if you wish to register. So again, hope this was really helpful. Please reach out to me. I know that this particular topic is really individualized and sometimes often sensitive. So if you want to reach out and chat with me one-on-one, I would love to do that. So please do shoot me an email to start with, bshelton@richmond.edu, and we can go from there. So again, thanks so much for joining me, and I hope that you all have a really great evening.